Imagine standing on a coastline where the water is so murky you can't see your own feet, the air smells of sulfur, and the local fishing boats come back empty day after day. This was the reality for thousands of miles of tropical coastline across the globe, from Pakistan to Southeast Asia. But then, an idea so massive, so ambitious took hold that many called it impossible. They decided to plant 100 million mangroves along the shore. That is more trees than there are people in most countries. People thought it was just a feel-good publicity stunt, a drop in the bucket against the vast power of the ocean. But what happened next didn't just change the scenery. It triggered a biological explosion that scientists are still struggling to fully explain. The ocean didn't just recover, it transformed into something unrecognizable, turning barren mudflats into the most productive ecosystems on the planet. To understand why this project was so insane, you have to understand what a mangrove actually is. Most trees hate salt. If you pour a bucket of salt water on your backyard maple or oak, it's game over. But mangroves are the rebels of the botanical world. They thrive where nothing else can survive, right in the line of fire between the crashing waves and the solid earth. They are the only trees on Earth that can filter salt out of the ocean and breathe through their roots in oxygen-poor mud. For decades, we treated these coastal forests like swampy wastelands. We cleared them for shrimp farms, luxury resorts, and wood. By the time we realized our mistake, nearly half of the world's mangroves were gone. The result was a catastrophe. Without the tangled roots of the mangroves to hold the earth together, the coastlines began to crumble into the sea. Storm surges that used to be blocked by the trees now swept inland with terrifying force, and the vibrant nurseries of the ocean simply vanished. That is when the 100 million tree mission began. This wasn't just about scattering seeds from a plane and hoping for the best. It was a monumental human effort involving local communities, massive logistics, and a deep understanding of marine biology. In places like the Indus Delta in Pakistan and the shores of Indonesia, thousands of volunteers waded waist-deep into the thick black mud. They carried saplings on their backs, dodging tides and heat, to place each tree by hand. Why such a massive number? Because in the world of coastal restoration, the ocean is a brutal boss. You can expect a huge percentage of new plants to be swept away by storms, or eaten by crabs. To win, you have to overwhelm the environment with life. You have to plant so many trees that the ocean simply has no choice but to let them grow. As the first few million trees began to take hold, the first miracle occurred. And it wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't the birds or the monkeys that returned first. It was the mud itself. You see, mangrove roots are like a giant underwater cage. As the tide rushes in, the roots slow down the water. When water slows down, the heavy sediment and dirt it carries sink to the bottom. Normally, this dirt would wash out to sea and choke coral reefs, but the mangroves trap it. Slowly, the ground began to rise. These trees were literally building new land, inch by inch. Within a few years, what used to be a slippery, eroding slope became a solid, stable foundation. This trapped sediment is also a carbon sponge. Mangroves can store up to 4 times more carbon than tropical rainforests like the Amazon. By planting 100 million of them, these teams weren't just fixing a beach. They were building a massive natural air cleaning machine that works 24 hours a day. But the real shocker was what happened underwater. For the first few years, it looked like a watery graveyard of sticks. But as the root systems grew into complex, interlocking mazes, they created something the ocean desperately needed: a sanctuary. If you are a tiny fish or a baby shrimp in the open ocean, everything wants to eat you. There is nowhere to hide. But a mangrove forest is like a fortress with a billion small rooms. Large predators like sharks or big tuna can't squeeze their bodies into the tight gaps between the roots. This became the ultimate nursery. Suddenly, the water wasn't just murky mud anymore. It was pulsing with life. Rare species of seahorses, snapper, and shellfish started appearing in numbers that hadn't been seen in generations. Scientists monitoring the project noticed a domino effect. As the small fish flourished in the safety of the roots, they eventually grew too big for the forest and headed out into the deep blue. This created a massive spillover effect. Local fishermen, who used to spend 12 hours at sea just to catch enough to feed their families, started seeing their nets overflow only a mile from the shore. The economy of entire regions began to flip. Instead of being a place of struggle, the coast became a place of abundance. And it wasn't just fish. The nutrient-rich water filtered by the mangroves started to heal the nearby coral reefs. Without the constant blanket of silt and dirt suffocating them, the corals began to regain their color. It was a total ecosystem reboot. One of the most unbelievable side effects was the change in the local climate and safety. We often think of trees as things that just sit there and look pretty, but 100 million mangroves are actually a biological shield. In 2004, and again in more recent years, we saw the incredible difference these forests make during tsunamis and hurricanes. Villages tucked behind a thick belt of mangroves often saw remarkably less damage compared to those where the trees had been cleared. The trees act like a giant shock absorber, soaking up the energy of the waves and breaking the wind. People who had been skeptical of the planting project suddenly realized that these trees were the only thing standing between them and the raw power of a rising ocean. They weren't just planting wood, they were planting insurance. As the project reached its midway point, something even more strange happened. The wildlife wasn't just returning, it was evolving its behavior to fit the new landscape. In the Sundarbans and other massive mangrove tracts, tigers, proboscis monkeys, and even rare fishing cats took up residence. The forest was becoming so dense and so rich in food that it created its own microclimate. It was cooler under the canopy, a vital relief in tropical zones where temperatures were hitting record highs. The sheer scale of the project began to influence the weather patterns slightly, as the massive amount of water vapor released by 100 million trees contributed to local rainfall. It was as if the earth was breathing a sigh of relief. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. You can't just put 100 million of anything in the ground without facing massive challenges. In the beginning, there were failures. Entire sections of the project were wiped out by unexpected pests or a particularly harsh season of storms. In some areas, the soil chemistry was so damaged by previous industrial use that the saplings simply withered. The teams had to become detectives. They realized that you can't just plant one type of mangrove. Nature loves variety. They started mixing different species, some that liked the deep water, and some that preferred the drier edge. They learned to work with the moon and the tides, planting only during specific windows when the moon's gravity wouldn't pull the young plants out of the mud. This was a lesson in humility. Man was trying to rebuild nature, but nature was the one holding the manual. The social impact was perhaps the most heartwarming part of the story. In many of these regions, women took the lead. They formed cooperatives to run the nurseries, growing millions of seeds from scratch. For many, this was the first time they had a steady income independent of the traditional, often failing industries. They became the guardians of the forest. If someone tried to come in and illegally cut down the new growth for charcoal, they were met with a wall of community resistance. The people realized that a standing mangrove was worth infinitely more than a cut-down one. A standing forest meant fish, it meant protection from storms, and it meant a future for their children. The project transformed from a top-down initiative into a grassroots movement that couldn't be stopped. Now, as we look at the results of these 100 million trees today, the ocean looks different. From satellite imagery, you can see the bright green fringe expanding every year. The water clarity in these regions has improved significantly. Blue carbon, the carbon stored in coastal and ocean ecosystems, has become a buzzword in global environmental circles, all thanks to the success of massive projects like this. But it's not just about the numbers. It's about the feeling of the place. If you boat through these new forests today, you are surrounded by a symphony of life. Crabs scuttle over the roots, birds dive for fish, and the air is thick with the scent of a healthy, living earth. It is a reminder that while humans have the power to cause immense damage, we also have an incredible capacity for restoration. But why aren't we doing this everywhere? If 100 million mangroves can save an entire coastline, why isn't every country with a tropical border doing the same? The answer is complicated. It requires giving up short-term profits from things like industrial shrimp farming or coastal development. It requires a long-term vision that lasts decades, not just a single election cycle. However, the success of this massive planting mission has provided a blueprint. It has shown that nature is incredibly resilient if we just give it a fighting chance. It has shown that the ocean has a memory, and it knows how to heal itself if we provide the right conditions. Let's talk about the incredible tech side of this. Monitoring 100 million trees is impossible for humans on foot. So, the project started using drones and AI. They used satellite data to map the growth rates and identify areas that were struggling. They could see heat maps of where the water was coolest and where the fish populations were densest. This data proved what the locals already knew. The mangroves were working. The project became a beacon for other nations. Pakistan's billion-tree tsunami project, for example, took these lessons to heart and achieved world records in mangrove restoration. They proved that with enough political will and community support, you can actually move the needle on a global scale. One of the most fascinating things about mangroves is their ability to deal with rising sea levels. Most land is at risk of being swallowed as the polar ice melts. But remember how mangroves trap sediment? They actually elevate the seafloor. As the water rises, the mangroves catch more dirt and build the ground up with it. They are literally a self-elevating coastline. This makes them the ultimate defense against the challenges of the next century. While we spend billions building concrete seawalls that will eventually crack and fail, the mangroves are building a living wall that gets stronger and thicker every year. It's a genius piece of natural engineering that we are only just beginning to fully appreciate. Looking back, the skepticism that greeted the start of the 100 million tree goal seems almost silly now. But at the time, the ocean seemed too big to influence. We are used to thinking of the ocean as an infinite void that we can only take things from or throw things into. This project flipped that script. It showed that the ocean is a partner. When we invest in it, it pays us back with interest. The unbelievable transformation of these coastlines is a testament to what happens when we stop fighting the sea and start working with it. The water is clearer, the fish are back, the land is growing, and the communities are thriving. Think about the sheer scale of the roots again. If you were to lay out the root systems of 100 million mangroves end to end, it would probably reach the moon and back. This massive underground and underwater network is a silent hero. It's a filter, a shock absorber, a home, and a pantry. It's also a bridge. It connects the world of the land to the world of the sea. In the past, we saw that border as a line to be defended. Now we see it as a zone of infinite possibility. The birds that migrate from thousands of miles away now have a place to rest. The sea turtles that were losing their nesting grounds now have sheltered beaches nearby. The story of the 100 million mangroves is also a story about time. You can't rush a tree. You can't force a forest to grow faster than the seasons allow. This project required patience that is rare in our modern, fast-paced world. It was about planting a seed today that you might not see the full benefit of for 20 years. But that is the nature of true legacy. The people who planted these trees knew they were doing it for the next generation. They were building a world they might not even get to see in its full glory. And that is perhaps the most unbelievable part of all. That in an age of instant gratification, we can still come together to build something that takes decades to mature. The ocean has a way of humbling us. Its storms are louder than our machines, and its depths are deeper than our knowledge. But on these restored coastlines, the ocean seems a little less like an enemy, and a little more like a garden. The salt spray no longer feels like the breath of a monster, but like the mist of a fountain. The transformation is so complete that if you hadn't seen the before pictures, the barren gray mudflats of the past, you would never believe they existed. You would think this lush, green paradise had always been here. That is the ultimate goal of any restoration. To make our work invisible, to let nature take back the throne so completely that we forget we ever disturbed it. As we move forward, the lessons from the 100 million mangroves are being applied to other ecosystems. From seagrass meadows in the Atlantic to oyster reefs in the Pacific, the idea of large-scale, nature-based solutions is taking over. We are learning that the best way to fix the planet is usually to look at what worked for millions of years before we arrived. Mangroves are the elders of the coast. They have survived everything the planet has thrown at them for eons. By bringing them back in such massive numbers, we are simply inviting the experts back to the table. We are saying, we don't know how to fix the ocean, but we know someone who does. The project also highlighted the importance of biodiversity. It wasn't just 100 million of the same plant. It was a complex mix of species, each playing a specific role. Some provide the heavy-duty structural support, while others provide the leaves that feed the tiny creatures at the bottom of the food chain. This diversity is what makes the forest resilient. It means that if a disease or a specific pest hits one species, the others can stand strong and keep the ecosystem from collapsing. It is a lesson in strength through variety, a principle that applies to far more than just trees. What happened to the ocean was unbelievable because we had forgotten what a healthy ocean actually looks like. We had become used to the gray, the quiet, and the empty. When the life came rushing back, it was a shock to the system. It was loud, it was colorful, and it was chaotic. The sound of thousands of snapping shrimp, The splash of jumping fish and the cries of seabirds created a wall of sound that was a pure joy to hear. This is the ocean's natural state. The silence of the past was the anomaly. The vibrance of today is the reality we were meant to live in. It also changed the way we think about engineering. For a long time, the answer to every problem was more concrete, more steel, and more machines. But the mangroves showed us that a biological system can be more effective and more durable than any man-made structure. A concrete wall doesn't heal itself when it gets hit by a storm. A mangrove forest does. In fact, the storm often brings in new nutrients that make the forest grow even faster. It's a system and an economy that doesn't just resist damage, it thrives on challenge. That is the kind of technology we need more of in the future. The journey to 100 million trees was long, and it's not truly over. A forest is a living thing that needs constant care and respect. But the momentum is now on nature's side. The seeds dropped by the first million trees are now planting themselves, expanding the forest further than humans ever could. We provided the spark, and now the wildfire of life is spreading on its own. This is the ultimate success. When the trees don't need us anymore, we know we've done our job right. We've given the ocean its lungs back, and now it can breathe on its own. As we look to the future, the success of the mangrove mission gives us hope for other seemingly impossible tasks. If we can replant the coast of entire nations, what else can we do? Can we regreen the deserts? Can we heal the Great Plains? The answer seems to be a resounding yes, provided we have the same level of commitment, community involvement, and respect for the natural world. The 100 million mangroves aren't just a story about trees, they are a story about human potential. They prove that our greatest achievements don't have to be made of glass and steel. They can be made of roots, leaves, and mud. So the next time you hear about a nature project that seems too big or too ambitious, remember the mangroves. Remember the murky water that turned crystal clear and the empty nets that became full again. Remember the villages that were protected and the carbon that was captured. The ocean is vast and powerful, but even the ocean responds to the power of 100 million tiny saplings. It's a reminder that no matter how far we've gone down the wrong path, nature is always ready to start again. We just have to be willing to get our hands dirty and plant the first seed. The ocean is waiting, and as we've seen, the results can be truly unbelievable. The project didn't just change the physical world, it changed the people who worked on it. There is something transformative about putting life back into the world. It gives you a different perspective on what matters. The volunteers and workers didn't just see themselves as laborers, they saw themselves as creators. They were part of something that would outlive them, something that would benefit people they would never meet. This sense of purpose is what fueled the project through the toughest times and the biggest setbacks. It was a shared mission that transcended borders and politics. In the end, the ocean didn't just get its fish back, it got its soul back. The coastlines are no longer just boundaries to be managed, but vibrant, living organs of the planet. The 100 million mangroves are standing tall, their roots deep in the mud and their branches reaching for the sun. They are a monument to what we can do when we decide to be healers instead of destroyers. The ocean is alive, and its heartbeat is stronger now than it has been in 100 years. That is the real miracle, and it's one that will continue to grow, one tide at a time, for centuries to come. The work continues, and with every new sapling that takes root, the unbelievable story of the 100 million mangroves enters a new, even more vibrant chapter. It's a story we all share now, a story written in the mud and the salt and the deep, beautiful blue of a recovering ocean. In every ripple of the water and every rustle of the leaves, the ocean is telling us thank you. And the best part is, this is a story that is only just beginning.